record button.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'll let Terrence lead off.
Yes. I'm Terrence. I'm acting moderator this time around for some basic housekeeping. We're going to hopefully everyone stays on mute until the end, which you can ask Wally questions. If you have questions in the meantime, I'll be watching the chat, so you can send them to the general chat or to me, and I'll ask them to Wally as it comes up to prevent or minimize the amount of interruptions. Today we have Wally, as I've mentioned, who is the Director of Operations at Darkroom Software, and he'll be giving our presentation today. I'll hand it over to Wally.
Okay. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? I hope you're surviving through this COVID craziness that we have going on. I'm going to just kind of jump right into this and start talking about green screen. Today's topic is green screen. And so several things we're going to talk about. First of all, we'll talk about how to set up a green screen event, or what a green screen event is, how to set it up, how to arrange if you want to use multiple backgrounds, some other little niceties about how you can do things with backgrounds. Also, we'll discuss just a little overview on lighting and what gives you the best results for green screen when you're dealing with Darkroom Booth. And then also, I'll take questions and things like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up and share my screen. Let's see. There we go. Share. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So what I've got here, first of all, I've selected, this is a sample event that comes with the software, sample green screen selection. And you'll see right here in the center, it's a single photo. And this particular event is set up to do 3 different background choices. I'm going to switch over to just kind of give you an overview of basically how it works, first of all, with this event, because it's a single background choice. So let's start with the screen, okay? So what you want to do for green screen, and just to clarify, green screen is kind of a catch-all term. It's technically Chroma Key. It's background removal. And so basically you take a photo in front of a certain solid color background, and that allows the software to remove that color and replace it with the background of your choice that's just a digital file. Now, the reason green is the most popular is because few people wear that color green, and so it's less likely that you'll encounter someone wearing that color green. You can also use Chroma Key blue, which is a very bright fluorescent blue. There are sometimes when a green doesn't work. For example, for a number of years before I finally retired last year from doing this, I photographed the University of North Texas cheerleaders every year, their group photos and calendar photos and so on. And they, if you aren't familiar with the University of North Texas, their color is green, exactly Chroma Key green. So you can't use a green screen with them. So I would use a blue screen so that I could still do background removal and everything for them. And that worked great. So in this particular scene, I'm going to click edit and I'm going to go right in here. So what you do, first of all, there's a number of elements that go to making up a green screen, but I'm going to start with the live view. So if you look here, there's our live view window. Now, if you're not used to doing green screen at all, when you create your live view window under normal circumstances, it would look like this, a gray background with some white text or a big number in it. So when you look at a template and you see that it has a gray spot where the photo or the live view is supposed to go, then that is for regular normal photos. If you see it like this, where the background shows through, then that is for Chroma Key. So the way you set that is you would just start by, in this case, I'm double clicking on the live view. Oops, that's not the live view. There's the live view. And you'll see right here, it says Chroma Key, green screen or blue screen background. So I just check Chroma Key. We got somebody joining. Okay, so now you see that it goes clear, and what that does is it lets the background show through. So if you look at a template, screen or print, and you see like this with anything but gray, then that is for green screen or for Chroma Key. And that's a quick indicator right there. We have a lot of people that will call support. This is a pretty common thing with this specific template right here. They'll choose this one and they'll say, you know, for some reason everything looks blotchy and there's red blotches on people's faces. Well, that tells me they're using this template without a green screen. And so the end result is it's trying to remove green. It can't find green and you end up with blotches of red on stuff. So if you're having that sort of problem, go in and look at your template. If you don't see gray boxes and you're not using a green screen, then you need to turn off Chroma Key. So that's how you would set up the live view. Is everybody got that? You just turn it on Chroma Key and then you put your background. In this case, it's a red curtain looking background that you just resize and put behind it. Okay. Now over on the left-hand side of this particular screen template, we have added a 3-photo template that uses the same background and basically the same thing. Each photo node is set for Chroma Key right there. You'll see that checkbox. Normally, for normal, you'd set it like that and you see the gray box. You double click on it, set that to Chroma Key, and that sets it for green screen. So when you have a green screen, then it's going to remove the background. Now in this case, I've just got 2 and 3, same backgrounds on each one. You can put a different background on each one. So photo 1 would always have, you know, one background. Photo 2 would have a different background. Photo 3 would have a third background if you want to. Yeah, that's kind of a personal preference thing. I think you can get too crazy with it, give people too many options and everything. So I would, I might not do that, but you might think it's great and your customers may love it. So that's one of those things that's just up to you personally. So that's our screen template. And that's just for a single background, regular green screen event. Now I'm going to jump over to the output section and let's talk about the print template. So in the case of green screen, you want to make a matching print template. So right here we have the same thing. We have photo nodes that are just on the top of the background. If you double click on it, under options, you'll see right there Chroma Key. Okay. And that just sets that to be transparent so the background shows through. Does anybody have any questions so far?
We seem good.
Okay, so that's a basic green screen setup. Now then, let's talk a little bit about setting up for multiple background selections. If we go back to that sample green screen selection, let's start with the screen template. Now, in this particular case, we have all the same elements. We have the live view that's transparent so that you can see the background behind it. We have our background here. But in this case, we have actually 3 different backgrounds. So if I double click on the background, right here, instead of single graphic, which would be the standard or the default, you'll see graphic list. Now, if you come up here and you drop this down, you see the 3 different backgrounds. So I'm going to click on edit and you'll see here. First of all, when you're doing a graphic list, you want to give it a name, okay? Because you can have multiple backgrounds on a graphic list. Multiple graphic lists on the same template. So in this case, we just have one. It chooses the background, but you could also use a graphic list for choosing a foreground. So if you wanted to have something different in front versus behind the subject, you could do that. You could do different things. So for example, in this case, we got 3 different backgrounds. If you look over on the left, you'll see them. One's a beach scene. One is, I think that's San Francisco or maybe New York, I don't know. And then down we got a wooded scene down there at the bottom. So those are those 3 backgrounds right there. Now I would strongly suggest that if you download these backgrounds that you're going to use from the internet, in many cases, a lot of times the backgrounds will have long and complex names. Sometimes it's random characters. If it's just if something you got off of a website. It could also be just a number of words like sunset scene at New York looking over the river, something like that. I would rename those and rename them something simple. In this case, I've got 001D, 002D, 003D. The reason for that is you're going to be using these in multiple situations in both the screen and the print template. You need them to be named exactly the same, and you need them to be named in the same order or listed in the same order. And doing it this way is much simpler than doing it with a big long name that you might accidentally have the name wrong. I've seen a lot of people have a problem with a green screen graphic list, and when you get to looking at it and analyzing it, they've hit the space bar twice between two words. Well, to a computer, having two spaces between a word, everything else exactly the same, but having two spaces between one word and only one space between another word and the other is two totally different names. So it's very important that they're the same. So that's why I say I would rename them something simple and easy to do. So you just add, and then, choose your backgrounds, add them into the list. And then once you get that all added, you click OK. So once again, to create a graphic list, you're going to give it a name. It needs to be a unique name. It can be anything. In this case, I've called it BG Scene, for short for background scene. And so you just want to have a unique name. It could be background, it could be foreground, whatever you want to do, as long as it's unique. And then you add your backgrounds. And I did mention that you can use multiple graphic lists. So for example, if you wanted to, let's say you're doing a baseball themed, party or something, and the background is going to be different baseball stadiums around the country. Maybe the, Texas Rangers in one and the Chicago Cubs in another, or whatever. But whatever their, pictures of their stadiums. But then in the foreground, you want to have the logo that goes with that stadium. Well, you can create two separate background lists, and you can actually set those to change together, or you can set them to change separately. So I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Together would be like to match the logo to the background, where separately would let you choose the background or the foreground separately. I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. So anyway, there's our graphics list. Everybody clear on how to set up that graphics list? Any questions?
Good.
Okay, now then, here's how you're going to let the customer choose their background. Over on the left-hand side, we've got three different little thumbnails of those same backgrounds. Now, if I double-click on one, you'll see down here, this is just a single graphic, one of the three backgrounds. And I've got it set right here under Booth Command. I don't know, can y'all see that, read that? Under Booth Command, you'll see choose graphic BG scene equals 1 plus start. All right, that seems kind of chaotic, but let me click right here on edit and you'll see. So what we're doing is the command, the thing I want Darkroom Booth to do when you touch that button. These are buttons on the left that let you choose the background. So the thing I want Darkroom Booth to do when you touch that button is I want it to choose a graphic. You could have any one of these commands down there, but we're going to have it choose a graphic. So when you touch the button, it's going to choose a graphic. Then you have, what do you want to choose the graphic from? Well, in this case, we want to choose it from BG Scene. If you had more than one, it would list all the separate backgrounds here, background lists that you have in your screen. If you choose all, then they'll all change together. So the logo matches the background, etc. So in this case, we're just going to choose background BG Scene. And I've got the index. That's the number of the background. So in this case, when you touch that button, I want it to choose the background from BG Scene and choose the first one. Does that make sense to everybody? So we're going to set it to choose the background. We're going to choose it from the BG Scene graphics list. And in this case, when you touch that first button, it's going to choose background number 1. Okay. And then I've also got it to start photo session when I touch it. If you did not check that box, then you'd have to have a separate start button. That's a personal preference on how you want to do it. Okay, so we're going to choose that, and that's how you choose that. And then you do the same thing over here. In this case, we're doing the same thing. Choose graphic from the background scene graphics list, but this time I want to choose number 2. Okay, does that make sense? And actually, I'm going to turn off that plus start because I don't want it to start in this case. Okay, and then the same thing down here. background scene number 3. So these are just buttons over here that when you press this, it chooses background 1, background 2, background 3. Now, if you look right down here, here are previous and next buttons. This is an alternate way of choosing the background. Whether you do it this way or the other way is personal preference. In most cases, you wouldn't offer both ways. We just did it in this particular sample so you could see both ways. Now, I personally prefer the thumbnail version because your customer can look at it and see what the background looks like. With previous and next, they have to press the button, press the button, press the button. If you had 6 or 8 backgrounds, that would get pretty tedious, especially if you got 2 or 3 people wanting to do it. And somebody says, what do you think? Well, I liked that second one. Okay, let me go back and see what that one was. No, I think I like the 4th one better. Then they're going to go back and forth. So it's just going to take extra time. My preference is using the thumbnail version where you just touch it once and it changes. And I'll show you all of those in operation. So once you get that all set up in your screen template, I'm going to jump out of this and go over to the print template now. So we're going to go over here to the output tab, and here's our matching print template. So let me open it. So in this particular case, it's just a single photo. So we have our photo node on top. You'll see the big white one with a clear background. It's just a standard photo node, but it's set to Chroma Key. Okay. And then we have our graphics list behind. Now, this is made exactly the same way. You just make it exactly the same way, call it the same thing, BG Scene, add your backgrounds with the same names in the same order. Works the same way. Once you do that, then you have that all ready. And I'm going to put this back up here where it's supposed to go. And then I'm going to jump out of this and show you how this works. Okay. Hang on one second. Let me get everything. Okay. Get out of there. Now I'm going to start a session and we'll see how this works. Okay. So there you see that lovely model there in my simulated live view. So if you look up here in the top, we've got the beach scene showing. If I click, like if I were using my finger to touch the screen, you'll see when I touch that second background, it changes the background. If I touch the third one, it changes to the third one. Change that one back. So you can just see how it just cycles. Whenever I touch it, it changes the background. And I accidentally clicked start, so it started a session, but that's okay. So now if you look at the next, and when I click next, it just goes to the next background, to the next background, to the next background. Previous takes you backwards. So you can see the two different ways of selecting your background when you do it that way. Anybody got any questions? Yeah.
How would you delete those arrow buttons?
Right here?
Yes.
Okay. In the, just like anything else, in the screen template, edit it, and then just choose it and delete. Press the delete key on your keyboard.
Awesome. Thank you.
So that's all there is to it. Like I said, you probably would not want to use both methods of selection. That would just confuse your customer. And, you know, if you had 1 or 2 backgrounds, previous to next is not bad. But if you've got 6 or 8, they're going to be there all day skipping through them to figure out which one they want. I would just use the thumbnail. I'd also caution people, there's not really a theoretical limit, or there's not a hard limit on how many backgrounds you can use. In theory, you could put whatever you wanted in there. I would probably keep it to 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6. If you give people too many choices, they'll be there all day. And you want them to choose a background and move on. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, anybody have any questions about how that worked with the scene and the 2 different, you set up both the graphics list in your print template and in your screen template. Any questions about all of that? Okay, I'm going to show you one thing real quick. So let's say this one is just a single photo, but what if you want to do multiple photos? We want to turn this into multiple photos. So you're going to resize. So let's move our photo node over here. And then our background and everything right there. Now you can actually select both of these. See over in the top right-hand corner how I've selected them both. If you select them both and you choose size, make same size and position, then that just matches them together right away. It makes it very quick and easy. So if I want to do a 3 photo, what I'm going to do, in order for the 3 photos to work correctly with the graphics list, you have to, they have to be the same name. So if you were to just come over here and create a new graphics list, it's going to tell you can't do that because you've already used that name. But what you can do is just duplicate it. So you select it and click duplicate. And then you can move that around anywhere you like and have multiple photos. And then you just duplicate your photo node and put it on top. And then you'd want to double click and change that number to 2. So that's something that you may or may not have use for. The way that works is if you have photo nodes that have the same number, 1, 2, or whatever, if they have the same number, they put the same photo in there. So if I had 2 number 1s, it would put the same photo in both of them, number 1. But if you just double click on it and change that number right there to 2, 3, whatever, then it inserts the correct photo in that photo node. Any questions about that?
No questions so far.
Everybody with me? Okay. Now then, I want to show you just a little bit about white balance and exposure. Those things are critical when it comes to green screen. So I'm going to go into session, and here we go. Anybody ever seen that happen? You've seen people maybe commented on Facebook, or you've had it yourself, where the live view just looks funky like that?
Surprisingly, I haven't.
You haven't. It is almost 100% of the time caused by either not enough available light or poor white balance. In most cases, poor white balance. So I'm going to show you how you can fix that. So right there, see how I just fixed it? The difference is I have 2 different photos. They are identical, but one of them is color corrected with the correct color. So I'm going to jump out of this and show you those 2 photos so you can see the difference in the white balance. So right here, if you look at this photo, let me go back to the first one. Okay, so this is the first photo that did not necessarily work correctly. You see the green is nice and even, and the exposure is good, but if you look really closely in my face and areas like that, there's a little bit of a green tinge, and it's because of poor white balance. So if you look at this photo, I'm going to transition to that. Now you'll see the green is more closer to proper chroma key green. The shirt is the correct color. It's more blue and less green, and the skin tone is more like it should be. So did you see that difference between the two, that one versus that one?
Yeah, I definitely can.
Okay, that's the difference between working and not working. So if you're seeing that sort of a result, let me switch back over to the other one. If you're seeing this sort of result in your photos, or usually your live view is where you'll see this, and it's usually caused by white balance. You don't have a proper white balance, and a lot of things can cause proper white balance if you have your camera set on auto instead of a fixed white balance. Then that can be a problem because it's going to vary with things like clothing and so on. If you have multiple light sources, sometimes I've asked people where they'll say, Oh yeah, I've got plenty of light. I've got a fluorescent light. I've got an LED. I've got flash, and I've got, and what they've done is instead of increasing the intensity of a single light source, they've added multiple light sources, which conflicts because every one of them is a different color balance, and so that can cause some problems. But this is typically caused by white balance that's not correct. So you can correct that white balance and clear that up right away. Now, it usually only affects the live view, and I'll show you what I'm talking about there. It usually only affects the live view. If you look here, you'll see this is the poor white balance, and this is the correct white balance. And so people will say, "Oh, but the prints look great." Well, that's because the algorithm is different. With the live view, we're dropping that image out 30 frames a second. It's happening very, very quickly. And so to keep that live view smooth and clean with a live video, it's a different algorithm that's faster and less tolerant. Where when it comes to the print, it's a single photo. You have more time to analyze it and drop out correctly and get a better quality dropout. So many times the print will be just fine. It just shows up in the live view. Does that make sense to everybody? No questions there?
Oh, there is a question, Wally. Sorry.
Okay.
Can you show how you update the white balance one more time
Hmm.
once you see that the live view is looking weird?
Well, in this case, the way I'm doing is that I have two separate photos, and I corrected one of them in Photoshop. But what you would do is you would need to set your camera. In most cases, if you're using flash, you want to set the camera, instead of auto white balance, you want to set it to flash so that you have a fixed white balance and it's not varying from photo to photo. And that's the biggest thing. That's something you want to try to work through before you get to the event. So you can see the difference between this photo and that photo.
So just to clarify, you're using another piece of software behind the scenes that swaps out these photos right now.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I'm using a product called ManyCam, where you can use still photos in ManyCam and it simulates a webcam. So as far as the software, as far as Darkroom Booth is concerned, it thinks it's connected to a webcam.
Gotcha. All right.
And then I'm just choosing different ones. So yeah, if you look right here, you'll see I've got several different photos, and these two are identical, but one of them is color balanced correctly, and I just click on it and it changes. So
perfect.
No
Thank
big
you, Wally.
mystery there. ManyCam's a great thing to use for demonstrations and stuff like that. Any questions about all of that? Everybody good there? Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about exposure while we're on the topic. Now, in our help system within Darkroom Booth, we have several Chroma Key background articles. And if you just click on the help icon and you go to Darkroom Booth, if you choose here and you type green screen, you'll see all these different articles that are available. Some of them are videos, some of them are text articles that have information about Chroma Key and different things you can do. But this is one about how to get better results. So I want to talk a little bit about exposure and proper lighting. So right here, we've talked about white balance, but if you look at this particular photo on the left, this is a properly exposed. We've got nice even green all the way across, no dark corners or anything. And you can see right over here, the photo that results from it, the dropout from the green screen, looks great. The whites in the uniform are nice and white. The reds are clean. The skin tones are correct. Everything about it looks like it should. Now, if we scroll down the page just a little bit, you'll see this photo is a little bit underexposed, especially in the corners. If you look up here, the corners are getting black. They're not green anymore. See where these are green evenly all the way out to the corner? Here we're losing the green. It's just got a green halo around her. So the result here is you can see the photo is becoming less contrasty and it's not as dropping out as cleanly. See how the black areas of the uniform are no longer black. They're kind of gray. That's where it's bleeding through a little bit with the green. So you can see the result of this lower exposure. Now, if I scroll down a little more, you'll see this really dark photo. This is just severely underexposed. The corners are black. There's almost no green visible, and you see the end result over here. So when you're doing a green screen and you run a test, don't necessarily, think that there's something that needs to be corrected in the software. Many times it's the exposure on your camera. So if you're getting pictures like this or this, chances are you need to get, look at your image. And a lot of times on Facebook, when someone's having a green screen problem, you'll see me comment and say, show me the pictures without the background in the Photos tab. I want to see what the camera is taking. And this is what I'm looking for, black corners. I want to see what that background looks like. And if it's a severely underexposed photo like this, you need to increase your photo exposure so that you get a better quality image and it looks more like this. Any questions there? Okay. Now, if you ask, again, I'm an old school photographer. I've been doing this for 40 years. And so if you ask 10 different photographers, what's the best way to light for Chroma Key, you're going to get 15 different answers. And chances are pretty good all of them will work. So there's no right, well, there are some right ways, but there's no definite, absolute, wrong way necessarily. There's a lot of different ways you can get good results. So this is an example right here, just a little simple example of a couple of options. Now, for simplicity and ease of use, especially in an event where you have a lot of people moving in and out, from the photo booth, I prefer a single light source directly above the camera. Typically flash. I'm almost always going to use flash, a good quality electronic flash, and I'm going to use some form of diffuser. Now my preference is an umbrella. You can use a softbox. Most all of them do about the same quality of light. They're just different designs to achieve the same goal. An umbrella, I think, is faster and easier to set up, and I usually buy inexpensive ones that if they break, I throw them away and get another one, versus really high quality, high dollar ones. But umbrellas are great. And so you put that above the camera. And when I say above the camera, I mean a couple of feet above the camera. I would have the center of the umbrella at least 2 feet, maybe 3 above the camera, directly above the camera. The advantage of doing that is it casts the shadow, or if there's any shadows, down below. Can I draw on this screen? Yeah, I think so. Hang on just a second. Spotlight, snap, format, eraser, draw. Okay, let me get a smaller. Okay, so for example, if I were to take this same scene right here, let me erase that and draw. Okay, so if I were going to take this same scene, so let's say that this is our background, okay, and let me do this down a little bit lower so you can see it better. All right, so let's say that this is our background, and here's my camera, and here's my subject. Don't make fun of my drawing. Okay, there's my subject. And, you're going to put an umbrella up here. So let's say that my umbrella is up here pretty high. All right. So if this is my umbrella and this is my flash, does that make sense to everybody? I'm not confusing anybody. So this is where your actual camera is. This is the light. So you'll see if this shines down this way, it's going to cast any shadow that may appear way down here. Okay. So if you bring this down closer, then it's going to cast any shadow straight like that. And so any shadow would be directly behind them and give you a less likely to drop out quality, because the shadow is not going to be green, it's going to be black. So the best thing to do is have your light higher above the camera so that you have your shadows cast way down here. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, The other thing about that is you want to have your subject. If you see here, the subject is several feet from the background. That gives you less likely to have a shadow. If you go outside on a sunny day and you go stand right up against a wall, like say 3 or 4 inches from a wall, then you're going to see a very hard shadow against the wall. But if you take 2 or 3 steps forward, then that shadow just virtually disappears. So you want to stay away from shadows. So a single light source, keep your subject 3 feet or so from the background, maybe 4 feet, whatever your space allows. And then you want to have your flash several feet, 2 or 3 feet above the top of the camera. Now, I've also got drawn here a couple of extra flash units. In a photo booth world, I would probably consider that to be optional and not necessarily required. A lot of it depends on your situation. And this sample that I've been using that you see here was done with a single light 3 feet above the camera into an umbrella. And that's this right here. This was done with a single light directly above the camera, about 3 feet into an umbrella with no background lights or anything. So you can see there is a little bit of a shadow right back there, but it's very faint. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Any questions or anything I didn't touch on in all of that?
Seem good.
No questions at all? Well, that's
I mean, I have a question for you at the end, but that's a different.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've covered pretty much everything unless somebody has a specific question.
I mean, my question is around remove BG.
Okay.
So we've talked about green screen with actual green screen, right? What's your
Right.
experience with green screen without green screen? I guess?
Okay. Yeah, Darkroom has a feature built in. We support a company called remove.bg. And so the way you do that, first of all, in global settings, well, you'd set up an account with remove.bg. You have to put in a credit card and everything because they're going to charge you by the image. And depending on what plan you choose, it's 15 to 20 cents an image. So you keep that in mind. But in here, under online accounts, you would set up your remove.bg account. Okay. Then once you do that, then you go back to the output tab and you check the box for remove.bg. Now, click enable. That's all you have to do. So you set up your backgrounds, your background lists, whatever you're going to do exactly the same way. No change. But you just don't use a green screen. That's all you do. So what it is when Darkroom looks at the scene, sees that there is no green, but you have an enabled remove.bg account, we send the image to remove.bg and that removes the background. Let me see if I can simulate the results. Hold on just a minute. Okay, so here we go. Now the live view is not going to be dropped out because you don't have a green screen and Darkroom can't drop it out for you. But remove.bg will remove it. So that session's done. Let's get out and go over here. And now you see right there, the image was sent to remove.bg. It removed the background, dropped it in here. And so it's done. It's really fast if you have quick, good internet. So you can see how well that dropped out. Here's what the original photo looked like. Got a really busy background. Any questions about remove.bg? You set it up exactly the same way, no difference. You just don't use a green screen.
So you haven't seen many customer requests or issues around it out of curiosity, right? So like,
no.
You're talking about like lighting and exposure is fun with green screen and can be temperamental, right? And I'm not trying to knock on green screen with green screen, but I'm just, when would one use one versus the other sort of thing? Or would you prefer people move towards one or the other, depending on that would make your life easier. Just tossing out different topics there.
No, good lighting is going to always improve the remove.bg dropout as anything. You need good quality lighting in all circumstances. We haven't had any problems with remove.bg. The biggest barrier for most people to not use it is cost, honestly, because it's about 15 to 20 cents an image. It's a great option in situations where a background, especially a big green screen, might be impractical. For example, we used it on several photo booth samples at PBX. If you were there, we had several around just facing out into the crowd, people moving around, throughout the room, where there wasn't room to have a background, and it worked great. So keep in mind, you do have to have internet. It sends it to be remove.bg over the internet and brings it back. Happens really fast, but you do have to have internet. So if you don't have access to internet, that's not going to work. You definitely, want to charge for it, because it's going to cost you, 15, 20 cents an image for every image you do. And if you're doing a 3 photo strip, that's times 3. So that one photo strip would cost, 50, 60 cents just for the remove.bg. So those are things you need to keep in mind. But as far as quality dropout, it does a phenomenal job. I mean, you can see here, let me get to you can see, that dropout around his hat and his clothing and around her hair is exceptional. So it's a very good dropout, very, very impressive. Any questions there?
Doesn't seem like we have any in the chat. Pretty happy about that. Yeah, anyone have questions they have for Wally?
Any discussion, regarding green screen or anything like that?
Maybe Raul has a question.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Wally, thank you for that presentation. That was really, really great. I have to say I've been using the green screen with Darkroom for quite some time, and I find it to be very, very exceptional. I've never had an issue with it. The only question I have is the green screen, it's something I've never tested before, is the green screen feature available for the video feature?
Actually, yes, it is. It works essentially the same way. I don't have, let me switch over here. Well, I can just use this. So basically what you would do when you're creating your template, the live view is not going to show the video necessarily, but what you do is when you're creating your template, when you add your artwork, okay, so you click on here, and this is how you would add your background. What you would do is here where it says all image files, if you drop that down, you'll see video files, and you just choose video files, and then video files will show up, and you just add your video file to the template just like you would a regular photo. And then when you do a video with a green screen, you would add that template, be back out of this, with your background under video, right here where it says template.
Okay.
Check the box and add your template with your background video there. Now, if you notice, it says when adding a template to video, an i5 or faster processor is recommended. I would seriously consider an i7,
Gotcha.
and I would want you, I would say you want to keep your videos short, because if somebody does a 2 or 3 minute video, typically, even with an i7, video processing can take more than real time. Okay, so real time would be a 2 minute video would take 2 minutes to render. More than real time might be 3 or 4 minutes if it's, say, double real time, depending on your processor and everything. But even if you get to where you can render a video in real time, the same amount of time that the video is in length, a 2-minute video is going to take 2 minutes. And that's a really long video, and you're going to have customers
Right.
standing there waiting a long time. But if you do something like a 4 or 5 second video, we were doing this at PBX year before last, actually, because this feature's been in there for a while. And we were doing, I think, a 5-second video, and it took 4 or 5 seconds with an i7, and most people didn't have a problem with that. So just keep in mind, video editing is pretty labor intensive, so you'd want to have a fast processor and keep your video short.
Gotcha. And just to clarify, yeah, typically we keep our, when a customer requests a video feature, we do keep it to like 8 to 10 seconds. If they're saying, congratulations or, happy birthday. And then, we just create a composite on the timeline. So the host has a nice little, nice video. I call it a video GIF, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But just to clarify, you could, when using the video feature, you could either have a still image in the background as a green screen, or a video clip looping, or perhaps playing, kind of creating like a dynamic scene. So maybe like a subway train as you're floating behind you as you're leaving your video message, if you will.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you could do that. You could have, if you really wanted to get crazy with it, you could have a bicycle maybe on a stand or something where somebody's sitting on the bicycle pedaling, and you put a background behind it of a street scene with, stuff moving behind them, and it looks like they're riding a bicycle down the street. So yeah, you could do something like that. Absolutely. Awesome. Now, if you use, just for clarification, if you use a template that has a video background for a still photo session, okay, so let's say you create your template and you put it here in this output section, but the background, instead of being a still photo like a normal template would be, it's a video, it's going to use the first frame of that video as a still background. So it'll function, it'll work, you'll get the background and everything. It's just pulling a still frame from the video and using that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any questions about that? Or anything else?
I did, if no one has questions, I did see that in the template, I think it said predefined mask. I was just curious as to what that setting was.
Yeah, that's, that applies to pretty much anything, but let me show you using the same template that I've been using. If you look under predefined mask, you've got all these different masks that are built into the software, different shapes, so to speak. So let's say if I choose like this one right here that has kind of a ragged edge and click OK, then when you take your still photo, it's going to have a ragged edge around it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
If you go back and look at those again, there's a lot of different shapes, like a star and, whatever, that you could use to make those. Round edges, square edges, just a lot of different little built-in masks. You can also use a custom one. It's a JPEG. There's an article on our website that explains how to make those. They're black and white JPEGs. And you could create a custom one if you wanted to. But yeah, there's a bunch of predefined ones. The scribble ones are kind of cool. They work better with still photos, non-green screen in that respect. But there's a lot of different ones. Like, for example, one like this might darken the bottom of the photo. So if you're doing, let's say you're doing a green screen with someone standing on the green screen, and you want that, to have the whole effect of the floor and everything, this would make it a little darker at the bottom so that it kind of naturally light falls off. So there's a lot of different things you could do with that predefined mask.
So Alexandra was asking, can you do mask with Chroma Key, or is it one or the other? It seems like it'd be one or the other based on the radio buttons.
Yeah, it's one or the other. You wouldn't want to do a mask with the Chroma Key necessarily. If you wanted to do that you could do the add effect and add that as a separate layer on top of the Chroma Key. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so that lets you add that on top, but still maintain that Chroma Key dropout. But you wouldn't really want to add it to the photo node because the whole goal is to drop all that green out. So there wouldn't be anything that really showed. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, probably nobody uses the add effect much. If you look here, you can add all sorts of different color, things on top of it. And you can get some pretty interesting effects. Like, for example, let's choose the grayscale. And then we'll take off the predefined mask for a second. So basically that makes the whole photo look like it's grayscale. But if you only stretch that to half the photo, then you'll see the left side is black and white, the right side is color. I've actually got a, let me take that off. So you can see here, you've got half color, half black and white. So you can actually use a filter effect on half the photo to get something changed, like this case. There's a lot of different things you can do with filters, and you can layer them to get different effects if you want to stack them on top of each other. For example, another thing that a lot of people ask about is like an Andy Warhol sort of effect. So if you do that, you get a solid space. But if I come in here under transparency and set that to say 30%, you'll see that it's a transparent red. So you could have like 4 quadrants, red, yellow, blue, whatever, and you just set the level of transparency so that it shows through whatever, amount you want it to show through. There's a lot of stuff you could do with that.
Can a photo strip be done that it takes 3 different chroma backgrounds at the same session, not choosing only one, but use 3 different backgrounds in the strip?
Sure. Yeah, if you wanted to. You mean like, I think I touched on that. Let me get out of this.
Yeah, you'd probably need 3 different graphic lists.
Yeah, I think let me see if there's a sample like that. Hang on just a minute.
Of course.
If you do it with graphic lists, you could, I mean, there again, you get really crazy with it to where people choose, all 3, or they take forever to choose, and you don't want to have them take forever. I'll just use this one.
Did you at all show the random? Can't you do random backgrounds too?
Not true random, because random, it's just like flipping a coin. You can't do a true random, but you can do a simulated random. The way you would do that is you would create your graphic list with, we'll say 10 different backgrounds. And then once you get that done, instead of putting a button on the screen to change it, you'd go to device control, and then under end instructions, add a booth command to choose next background or next graphic, and then choose your graphic list. And then what that would do is the first session would be background 1, the second session would be background 2, etc. And then it would cycle back around to 1 again eventually. Okay. So it would change the background every time. It's just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc.
But you could load that up with like random, right? Where like 1 and 5 could be the same backdrop,
sure,
right? And kind of do something like that. Okay, sorry, yeah. I didn't mean to. So back to the, I guess, multiple green screens per a strip.
Oh yeah.
Sorry,
so yeah, you can use a lot of different things like that to get creative with how you do stuff. On the that question about, let me go back to this one. In this case, we have 3 of the same background, but they're 3 independent JPEGs. So if you just put a different background in there, so background 2 would be something different, background 3 would be something different, then the end result is they have different backgrounds on every session or every strip there. And you could get really crazy with it. I've given this illustration before, but you could do a, I think I've got a sample of it. Hang on just a second. Zombie. Yeah. Here's a thing that I've done, you know, as an example, and Halloween's coming up. If you look here, we have a graphic that's got no zombie. If you look, it's actually a graphics list, and it has two different backgrounds. One of them is a zombie PNG. The other one is no zombie. In other words, it's just a blank PNG, the same size with nothing in it. Okay. And then I've got that set up to where it changes using booth control. So what happens is, let me see if I can show you this with, so I've got a button here that normally you wouldn't have this button. You do it with your booth control, but basically when I click on the button, you see the zombie. When I click on it, you don't. So what you do is you're controlling this from your cell phone using booth control, and everybody's taking their picture, and you pick out one, you know, let's say it's a birthday party for a bunch of 16, 17-year-old kids, and there's 20 or 30 kids there. You pick out one kid in the crowd, you know, that one kid. Everybody could pick out a kid. You pick out a kid in the crowd, and every time he gets in the booth, you hit the button on your phone, and he gets the zombie, but nobody else does. You could do the same thing with a ghost or a ghoul or, you know, something behind him. But basically, he gets a slightly different background. And you could really get this crazy to where every time he gets in, maybe this zombie is moving closer to him every time. So he gets in the booth, he does a session, he's got a zombie, but nobody else does. He doesn't know why. Maybe he doesn't say anything right away. But then the next time he gets in, you hit another button and he gets the zombie a little closer to him, and so on. So you just, you know, use that to generate some excitement, some fun. Everybody's showing the strips. Well, I don't have a zombie. How come you have a zombie? Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so in this case, I've added a button on the screen to do that, to change that zombie. But in that case, you would do that with, you know, like your cell phone or something, using booth control. Any other questions, anybody?
There is one more question here.
Okay.
Tom asks, in template designing, is there an option to warp or curve text like word art? My initial reaction would be not in Darkroom, but in
Within
Photoshop
Darkroom.
or something like that.
Yeah, you'd have to do that in Photoshop and bring it as a PNG. There's not in Darkroom.
Okay, so we're at 101 or 102. Any last questions, or so we can let Wally go if there isn't?
Anybody?
No, everyone says thank you. All right, thank you so much, Wally.
You're welcome. Y'all have a great day. Next week, I think we're doing this again. I forgot the topic. I think next week is iPad.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so we'll have some demos with the new iPad. We just released a new version with a couple of new features. I'll show you those as well. If you have any questions about iPad, come back and join us next week.
Well.